Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Israeli officials say fighter jets struck 450 Hamas targets in Gaza and its troops have seized a militant compound over the past 24 hours. More than 20 people were killed Sunday in Sudan after shells hit a market in a suburb of Khartoum, the latest bloodshed in the fighting between Sudanese government and the paramilitary rapid support forces. And water harvesting and recycling technology developed by a Kenyan entrepreneur could help reduce water shortages during dry seasons. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has wrapped up his shadow diplomacy tour of the Middle East in Turkey on Monday after only minimal success in forming a regional consensus on how to ease the suffering of the civilians in Gaza. Blinken met in Ankara with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan after a very busy weekend of travel that saw him stop in Israel, Jordan, the occupied West Bank, Cyprus, and Iraq to build support for the Biden administration's proposal for humanitarian pauses to Israel's relentless military campaign in Gaza. Secretary Blinken hopes that pauses in the war would allow for the release of hostages captured by Hamas and prevent the conflict from spreading regionally. While in Turkey, Blinken discussed the shared commitment to facilitating the increased sustained delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza. Blinken's arrival in Turkey came after a surprise visit with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in the Israeli-occupied West Bank Sunday. Abbas is demanding an immediate Israeli ceasefire, but Israel so far is rejecting that request. Gaza's health ministry says dozens died in a strike on a refugee camp overnight Saturday. Protesters took to the streets of Ramallah in the West Bank to protest Blinken's visit.
This visit came to expand the massacres in the West Bank and Gaza. It will not bring us peace or benefit the Palestinian people in any way. Rather, it supports the massacres in Gaza, Jenin, Kalandia, and the West Bank.
While in Turkey, Secretary Blinken did not meet with Turkish President Recep Erdogan, who has been highly critical of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and among NATO allies in not expressing full support for Israel's right to defend itself. Blinken's shadow diplomacy travels come as Israeli troops have surrounded Gaza City and cut off the northern part of the Hamas-ruled territory. Israeli forces are expected to enter the city soon and are likely to face Hamas militants fighting street by street using a multitude network of tunnels. Casualties are likely to rise on both sides in the nearly one-month-old war. Israeli defense forces say their fighter jets struck 450 Hamas targets in Gaza and troops seized the militant compound in the past 24 hours. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says the airstrikes have killed dozens of people. A Reuters journalist in the Gaza Strip described the overnight bombardment from the air, ground and sea as one of the most intense since Israel launched its offensive in response to a surprise attack by the Hamas on southern Israel on October 7th. Israel is facing mounting pressure to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza. Roughly 1,100 people have left the Gaza through the Rafah crossing into Egypt since last Wednesday under an apparent agreement among the United States, Egypt, Israel and Qatar, which mediates with Hamas, according to the Associated Press. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated that without the return of hostages taken by Hamas militants, no ceasefire will happen. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias has more.
During an unannounced visit to Iraq, Secretary of State Antony Blinken issued a warning to third parties against moves to widen the Israeli-Hamas war.
To anyone who might seek to take advantage of the conflict in Gaza to threaten our personnel here or anywhere else in the region, don't do it.
The United States' commitment to the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Gaza and the support for a two-state solution were also among the topics that Blinken said he discussed during a meeting earlier Sunday with Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank. Blinken also met over the weekend with Arab foreign ministers. He explained to them that the U.S. doesn't support an immediate ceasefire in Israel's war against Hamas because it will allow the U.S.-designated terror group to regroup. Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner elaborated on the matter on ABC's This Week show.
Although we have made clear that we would support and are advocating for humanitarian pauses to allow humanitarian aid to be distributed to potentially facilitate the release of more hostages.
But a ceasefire won't be declared until the militant group Hamas returns the hostages it kidnapped during its October 7 terror attack, stressed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu while visiting an Israeli Air Force base. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who appeared on NBC's Meet the Press, noted he'd travel to Israel if conditions allow to facilitate the return of stranded Ukrainians. He was also asked if he believes Israel is following the laws of war.
If terrorists are attacking, if terrorists attack, if they behead children, you have full right to defend people and defend your own country, state. If we can open humanitarian corridors, take away prisoners of war, help people who are not involved there, the whole world should do this.
His remarks came as the World Food Program chief, Cindy McCain, warned again that food supplies are running out in Gaza and that the crisis threatens regional peace and stability. Verónica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
The Palestinian death toll in the Israeli-Hamas war has nearly reached 10,000, according to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. In the occupied West Bank, more than 140 Palestinians have been killed in violence and Israeli raids. More than 1,400 people in Israel have been killed, most of them in the October 7th Hamas attack that started the fighting, and 242 hostages were taken from Israel into Gaza by the militant group. For more on the dire situation in the region, let's go live to correspondent Jan Bochat, who is standing by in East Jerusalem. Jan, tell us more about what you're seeing and what you're hearing at your location.
Good evening, Esther. This morning, a Palestinian teenager stabbed 2 Israeli soldiers here at the entrance, one of the entrances of the old city, just a few hundred meters from where I am. This is the second incident like this, stabbing a Palestinian boy stabbing soldiers here in Jerusalem in a week. There's a lot of fear here that the situation could get out of control in eastern Jerusalem and the West Bank due to the fighting in Gaza and due to the military incursions that Israeli forces are doing in refugee camps and the West Bank cities, looking for people linked to Hamas. The situation, it's dire here.
Yeah, and Israeli forces, we know, have cut off North Gaza from the rest of the besieged territory. What are the implications of this?
Well, they were able to reach the Mediterranean Sea, and there's no connection between the north of Gaza and the south of Gaza, at least no connection for the Hamas fighters overground. We don't know if the tunnels are operating underground. But the real fight will start when the Israeli forces enter Gaza City. IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, said in the next days, in the next 48 hours, Israeli soldiers will enter the city. And it's very likely that the battles will be very, very aggressive there.
Yeah, and many thanks for your reporting. Stay safe. VOA's correspondent Jan Bochat reporting live for us from East Jerusalem. Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, a spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, says the ongoing ground operation coupled with diplomatic efforts are both needed to ensure the release of hostages. For more developments, VOA's Peter Claudius spoke with Lerner.
The IDF is operating based on principles of distinction, military necessity, proportionality, and weighing up the 3 of those components together in order to achieve our military goal. In order to conduct that, one of our main efforts in the last 3 weeks has been to evacuate people from harm's way. We've been encouraging people through text messages, through phone calls, through voice messages, through leaflets we've dropped from the sky, phoning people and encourage them to leave the combat zone. This is where Hamas is operating in the north of the Gaza Strip, and you need to go south. It is safer in the south. There is no combat going on in the south, and that's what we've been doing. We've seen a huge shift of people. Around 1 million people or so have left the Gaza Strip, the north of the Gaza Strip, gone down south in order to get out of harm's way. And we did the same today, and they did the same today. So they're trying to keep people keep them in harm's way. Of course, that is a huge challenge for any military to operate in the urban areas, and our goal is to try and limit the civilian casualties as the operation proceeds. It is an unfortunate reality of warfare but we need to remember, we did not ask for this war. We did not plan on going to war. So much so that the IDF actually failed the people of Israel, because we were working under the assumption that Hamas doesn't want to have a war with us. And they were able to conduct such a brutal massacre of over 1,400 people.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lena, before you go, talk to me about the latest development about Israel's border with Lebanon, especially following the recent clashes there.
So Hezbollah has been escalating the confrontation on the border with Israel. We believe it's under the instructions of Iran. We've had extensive rocket fire, mortar fire, attempts to infiltrate Israel. They've used drones, sniper fire, as well as machine gun fire. So there's lots of events that have happened. We have, I think, 5 or 6 soldiers on our side that have been killed in these exchanges.
That was Israeli Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner speaking with VOA's Peter Clotty. Nearly 1 month into the Israeli-Gaza war, many analysts say there is little sign that efforts to secure an end to the fighting will succeed, and warn that the resulting humanitarian crisis could destabilize the Middle East even wider. Professor Shibli Telhami of the University of Maryland believes that the unprecedented death toll represents a major shift that will only increase hostility between the Palestinians and Israelis.
Make no mistake, this is not just another episode of violence between Israelis and Palestinians. This is a paradigm-forming moment. It's a paradigm-forming moment for generations to come. Certainly in the Arab world, among Palestinians, among Israelis, among Muslim-majority countries, but I think beyond that, I think this is a paradigm-forming moment. And what I mean by that is, this is not like the ceasefire will come tomorrow and people will shift their views. The scale of horror that we have witnessed, both in Hamas's attack on Israel and obviously the Israeli bombings and operations in Gaza, have been so high, and the language has been so extreme, that it is impossible that it is not impacting people's view of the conflict. And I think that particularly the view of the United States.
Well, that was Professor Shibli Telhami of the University of Maryland. More than 20 individuals have tragically lost their lives and several others have been injured. Shell attack strikes busy market in Omdurman, a suburb of Sudan's capital in Khartoum. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
The bustling market in Omdurman was struck by shells following intense exchange between the Sudanese army and the RSF on Sunday. A group of lawyers expressed deep concern and strongly condemned the fighting between the two factions in densely populated areas. The conflict in Sudan between the regular army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Force is in its 7th month, with no signs of abating. The death toll over the 6 months of fight has been devastating for the country, with more than 10,000 casualties, according to an estimate by the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data. 5.6 million people have been displaced or have become refugees in neighboring countries. The impact on Khartoum is immense, with widespread destruction and political fragmentation among supporters of the two military commanders fighting for control of the country. To address the ongoing conflict, Sudan's army has agreed to send a delegation for talks with the RSF to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in a bid to achieve at least a temporary halt to the fighting. The power struggle over the terms for a gradual transition from military to civilian rule is not only devastating to Khartoum, but it has also led to ethnically driven attacks in parts of Darfur in western Sudan. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Now to West Africa. A lawyer for ex-Guinea military ruler Musa Dadis Camara says he was taken back to custody Saturday, denying Camara was a willing participant in an earlier armed jailbreak that he described as a kidnapping force. Now, for more on this report, I'm joined live from New York by Elise Kepler, an Associate International Justice Director with Human Rights Watch. Elise, welcome to Africa 54. Tell us, do you think this was an inside job, or was Musa Camara kidnapped?
With this weekend's dramatic developments, Dadis Camara, former president, and 3 other alleged perpetrators of the 2009 Stadium Massacre trial left detention facilities. It remains unclear what exactly happened that led to that departure. But fortunately, we did ultimately see them brought back into custody. The military prosecutor, we understand, or perhaps the domestic prosecutor, has opened an investigation into these events to figure out what exactly has transpired.
Elise, we know Camara and his co-accused were found guilty in the 2009 stadium massacre where more than 150 people were killed, women were raped. But does this jail time count as justice or enough punishment?
The 2009 Stadium Massacre in Guinea is one of the most brutal incidents in that country's history, with the rapes, extensive rapes and murders that happened in the stadium on peaceful protesters. The trial is actually still ongoing. The suspects have been in detention because they are on trial, and this trial has progressed substantially, but not to the point of verdict. It's essential that all suspects, including Claude PV, who remains outside the detention facility, is brought back safely. And crucially important that all of these alleged perpetrators, the 4 who left the prison facility, along with the other 7 who are on trial, are able to be part of the trial going forward and are in custody to do so.
Elisa, I remember you covering this story from the source, from the courthouse there, talking to families of the victims who were killed. Do you think the current government is doing what it should do in terms of offering sufficient security for victims of the families that were murdered?
This trial has been a history-making event in Guinea, where impunity for abuses has been the norm in the past. This is a breakthrough in advancing justice. Victims campaigned for this trial for more than a decade, and it's been really incredible to see over the past year all 11 accused, including former President Dadis Camara, ministers before the judges, victims taking the stand to share crucial evidence, getting ready now for witnesses to come forward. This is such an important justice effort for the victims, and it's essential that it not be thwarted. So in terms of achieving that, adequate security, clearly we've seen that that is a major challenge and needs to be addressed in the coming period, along with protection for victims. We heard victims were quite concerned over the weekend with the suspects out of custody and PV still out of custody. It's essential they have protection and that there's security and resources to do so that justice can be delivered at last.
Elise, many thanks for keeping up with what's happening there in Guinea. Elise Kepler is Associate International Justice Director at Human Rights Watch.
Thanks.
Still to come, a wrap-up of the weekend's African sports news. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Lino Khmudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
You're watching Africa 54 from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington, D.C. In other news, South African officials say they are recalling all of their Israeli-based diplomats to signal their concern over the situation in Gaza. Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor says South Africa is extremely concerned at the continued killing of children and innocent civilians in the Palestinian territories and, quote, "We believe the nature of response by Israel has become one of collective punishment." The Red Cross says at least 15 people have died in Kenya as floods swept away houses and devastated farmland following torrential rains. Kenya has experienced heavy rainfall in recent days, particularly in the nation's bone-dry north, where water gushed into homes and submerged some roads. And U.S. rapper Kendrick Lamar is headlining Move Africa, a global citizen experience, a new initiative to establish an international touring circuit in Africa. He launches his tour with a concert in Kigali, Rwanda on December 6th. African artists recently included Burna Boy, Rema, and Davido. Water harvesting and recycling technology developed by a Kenyan entrepreneur could help reduce water shortages during drier times of the year. Juma Majanga reports from Kenya.
In the scorching sun in Isinya, a town in Kenya's Kajiado County, Daniel Wanjuki marvels at lush green grass and vegetation grown using recycled wastewater. Kenya still grapples with a water shortage, a problem largely pronounced in semi-arid lands like this one. Wanjuki, the founder of the waste management services company EcoSave, says his wastewater recycling technology can help cut the shortage.
We have this volume of water today that immediately becomes waste by midnight, let's say. And tomorrow you have to go for more water, to abstract for more water, to fill up the gap. I saw an opportunity where wastewater, if harnessed, treated, decontaminated and neutralized, could be reused over and over again.
EcoSave Africa uses a biological agent called EcoTreat to break down wastewater, remove the bad odor, coloration, and pathogen bacteria, and recycle it back into use without much harm to the environment. The non-mechanical technology reduces the methane gas usually generated during waste management, thus benefiting the environment.
It's about six seasons of no rainfall around here. And when you look at it, you see that if there was water, people would survive it. But without water, there's no chance. Both the wildlife and the livestock have suffered the impact of lack of water. And the aspect of us not keeping the little or holding the little that we get is a big challenge that we should actually try to overcome by creating opportunities for water harvesting, water storage, and finally water reticulation or recovery.
Users of the biological water recycling technology say it is not only environmentally friendly, but also cost-effective. William Kiari has deployed the technology in his hotel. He uses recycled water to grow trees to improve shade in the compound.
This is saving us significant amounts of money. We would say a minimum of 100,000 shillings a month. And maybe we are spending 10,000 shillings a month at most for buying that culture. And the system has hardly any maintenance needs, and in a very dry area we can recreate greenery.
Water remains a big factor in food production. The theme for this year's World Food Day, celebrated October 16, was Water is Life, Water is Food. Wanjuki hopes to spread his wastewater recycling technology to the rest of the world.
Be confident as we go to COP28 that the technology we are deploying here in this compound will be deployed in 1,000,001 houses around the world. And that's what we are set up to do.
The United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 6 is to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Kenya is still classified among the most water-scarce countries in the world, according to USAID. Juma Majanga, VOA News, Isinya, Kenya.
Now to sports. David Doyle brings us up to speed on this weekend sports news, including a record-breaking win at the New York City Marathon and a record-breaking loss at the Cricket World Cup.
Here's Africa's latest sports news in 60 seconds. Ethiopia's Tamarat Tola crushed the competition to win the New York City Marathon on Sunday in a course record of 2 hours, 4 minutes and 58 seconds. In the women's race, Kenya's Helen Obiri produced an extraordinary final kick to outlast Letesenbet Gide by 6 seconds and cross the finish line first. Wydad Casablanca secured a 2-1 home victory over South Africa's Mamelodi Sundowns in the first leg of the inaugural African Football League final. The second leg of the 8-team knockout tournament takes place in Pretoria next Sunday. And finally, South Africa suffered a team record loss by 243 runs on Sunday against Cricket World Cup hosts India. But with a semi-final place already booked, coach Rob Walter said there'll be no panic in the camp.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.